In the bustling streets of downtown Portland's historic market district, a ruthless cartel enforcement unit is about to learn a devastating lesson. They see the weathered Pike Street Deli as just another local business. Its owner, Marcus Mike Sullivan, as nothing more than an overweight shopkeeper struggling to keep his family's legacy alive. What they don't realize is that for 2 decades, he commanded Delta Force's most secretive counter-terrorism unit, the Ghost Hunters. Before we dive deeper, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story resonates with you, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow we've saved something truly special for you. The early morning mist clung to Portland's cobblestone streets as Marcus Sullivan methodically prepared his deli for another day of business. At 54, his imposing 6'4" frame carried more weight than during his military days. But beneath the added pounds lay the coiled strength and practiced efficiency of someone who'd never forgotten how to stay alive in hostile territory. His Belgian Malinois, Cipher, patrolled the shop's perimeter, the dog's ears constantly tracking sounds that most would miss. Marcus paused while restocking the display case, his trained eye catching the reflection of an unmarked black SUV making its third pass of the morning. The vehicle's tinted windows and careful pace suggested surveillance rather than casual interest. Cipher's low growl confirmed his suspicions. Someone was watching the deli, gathering intelligence, testing routines. Old instincts, honed across countless classified operations, began to surface. The deli, situated at a crucial intersection in Portland's historic district, represented more than just Sullivan's retirement dream. The 3-story brick building, with its restored 1920s facade and prime location, offered something invaluable: control of sight lines and access to 4 major downtown arteries. The family business, known for its famous pastrami and homemade pickles, provided perfect cover for monitoring the neighborhood's changing dynamics. A motorcycle's distinctive rumble echoed off the old brick buildings. Marcus recognized Detective Sarah Chen's Triumph before it appeared around the corner. The veteran organized crime investigator had become a regular presence since he'd bought the deli 6 years ago, one of the few people who seemed to understand that his easygoing demeanor masked something far deadlier. "Mike," she called out, killing the engine and removing her helmet, "we need to talk." Her expression carried the weight of serious news. The Romano's place? They're gone, cleared out overnight, left everything behind. Marcus straightened, wiping his hands on his apron. When? Last night. But that's not the worst part. Sarah's hand unconsciously moved closer to her service weapon. This morning, expensive suits started showing up, asking about property assessments, health code regulations. They're not even trying to hide their connections anymore. Escobar Cartel, Marcus stated flatly. It wasn't a question. Getting bold. 4 businesses in the last month. They offer cash first, way above market value. She left the implications hanging. "Mike, these aren't ordinary criminals. They've got military training, high-end equipment. The FBI won't even move without ironclad RICO evidence." Marcus nodded, his mind already mapping patterns, identifying likely approaches, calculating defensive positions. The deli's historical architecture, originally preserved for its character, created natural choke points and covered positions. He'd chosen this building carefully, though he'd hoped never to need its tactical advantages. "You should think about selling," Sarah suggested, though her tone indicated she already knew his answer. "No one would blame you. They're systematically taking every strategic property in the district. Marcus's face showed no emotion, but his eyes hardened with the same intensity that had once commanded America's most elite warriors. My grandfather opened this deli in 1947 after coming home from the Pacific. I'm not surrendering it to criminals. Sarah studied him carefully. Like most local law enforcement, she'd heard rumors about his military service. Unlike most, she'd done some digging. The official records were heavily redacted, but they hinted at operations that officially never happened, in places that officially didn't exist. They'll come for you, she warned. Probably soon. This location is perfect for their needs. Multiple escape routes, legitimate business cover, clear lines of sight down 4 major streets. Let them come. Marcus's voice carried absolute certainty. Some things are worth defending. As Sarah rode away, Marcus whistled for Cipher and headed toward the deli's basement. Behind the walk-in coolers and storage shelves lay a hidden room he'd installed his first week of ownership. The heavy door opened silently on well-oiled hinges, revealing racks of equipment he'd hoped would gather dust forever. His secure phone chirped with a message from an old contact in military intelligence. Cartel moving aggressive. Multiple properties acquired. High-level interest in your area. Watch your 6. Marcus activated his security system's main console, bringing up feeds from cameras hidden throughout the historic building. 3 black SUVs rolled past his storefront, moving slowly, conducting reconnaissance. He recognized the pattern. He'd taught similar techniques to Delta operators in 5 different countries. They're marking their next target, boy, Marcus told Cipher, scratching behind the dog's ears. But they don't know who they're dealing with. The rest of the morning was spent making calls to old teammates, men who'd fought beside him in shadows, conducting missions that would never see official acknowledgement. The ghost hunters might have officially disbanded, but the bonds forged in combat never truly broke. Captain Jack Frost Martinez answered on the first ring. Been a while, Big Mike. Too long, Frost. Remember that favor from Damascus? A low whistle. Must be serious if you're calling that in. How bad? Cartels moving into the district, taking businesses, setting up distribution networks. They'll be here soon. Need some backup. Might not hurt to have the old team together one last time. A pause. You know we're not as young as we used to be, boss. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. Neither are they. As the lunch rush began to wind down, Marcus walked his property again, this time seeing it through a commander's eyes. Every vintage architectural feature, every restored period detail, every sight line and access point could be turned to his advantage. Cipher barked once, a warning. More vehicles approaching. The same SUVs from earlier, this time stopping directly. In front of his deli, Marcus straightened his back, adjusted his stained apron, and prepared to play his role. Let them think he was harmless. Let them underestimate him. It was a mistake they would only make once. 5 men emerged from the SUVs, their tailored suits, incongruous against the historic district's weathered brick. Marcus counted 2 more remaining with the vehicles, hands concealed beneath expensive jackets. Cipher maintained his position, muscles tense but silent under his master's gentle touch. The leader approached with practiced confidence, his platinum watch catching the afternoon light. Mr. Sullivan, my name is Gabriel Vega. I represent an investment group with significant interest in historic properties. His English carried the polished accent of expensive South American private schools, but his eyes held the cold calculation of someone accustomed to taking what he wanted. Marcus played his role perfectly, projecting the image of a simple deli. owner, while his trained gaze catalogued tactical details. The men spreading out around him showed military discipline, likely former Colombian special forces. Their attempt at casual positioning followed standard intimidation protocols. "Beautiful building you have here," Vega continued, gesturing at the restored facade. "The architectural details are particularly impressive. Must have taken considerable investment." "Family legacy," Marcus replied modestly. "3 generations of serving the neighborhood." He didn't mention how the building's original freight elevator provided a perfect emergency exfiltration route, or how the old coal chute could be repurposed as a secondary escape tunnel. 2 of Vega's men had drifted toward the deli's entrance, their movements betraying professional training despite their business attire. Marcus noted their sightline assessment, the way they marked potential cover positions. Not real estate investors, advanced team for a tactical operation. The morning light filtered through the historic stained glass windows of Pike Street Deli, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the worn wooden floors. Marcus Sullivan moved through, his morning routine with practiced precision, laying out freshly baked rye bread and preparing his grandfather's secret pastrami recipe. To any observer, he was just another neighborhood shopkeeper, his large frame and gentle demeanor making him appear slow and harmless. The deli's brass bell chimed as early customers began trickling in, mostly regulars who'd been coming for years. Marcus greeted each by name, remembering their usual orders and family details with the same attention to detail that had once helped him track high-value targets across multiple continents. Mrs. Henderson, picking up her weekly order of chicken salad, didn't realize her friendly deli owner had once coordinated simultaneous raids in 3 different countries. Behind the counter, Marcus maintained constant awareness of his surroundings while appearing completely absorbed in his work. His peripheral vision tracked movement patterns through the windows, marking regular traffic versus potential surveillance. The weight he'd gained since retiring provided excellent cover. Few would suspect the deft way his hands moved, while slicing meat reflected thousands of hours of close-quarters combat training. Cipher lay in his usual spot near the register, appearing to doze, but actually monitoring the shop's entrance with military precision. The Belgian Malinois had been specifically chosen for his ability to appear as a friendly shop dog, while possessing the same elite training as his military counterparts. Customers who scratched his ears didn't notice how he positioned himself. For optimal coverage of entry points, the deli's location had been selected with similar careful planning. Situated on the corner of Pike and Madison, the historic building offered clear views down 4 major streets. The original architecture provided multiple defensive advantages disguised as period features, the decorative cornices offering perfect sniper positions, the restored coal chute providing a hidden emergency exit, the basement's original stone walls naturally bulletproof. Marcus checked his security feeds discreetly while restocking the display case. 27 cameras hidden throughout the building provided comprehensive coverage, their feeds encrypted and routed through multiple secure servers. The system had cost a small fortune, but as his old Delta Force commander used to say, proper preparation prevents poor performance. The morning crowd thinned out around 10, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and his memories. His hands moved automatically through the familiar motions of preparing more sandwich fillings, but his mind was elsewhere, reviewing tactical options and contingency plans. The basement's hidden room contained enough equipment to arm a small tactical team, not because he was paranoid, but because experience had taught him the value of being ready. Sarah Chen's warning about the Romano family's sudden departure troubled him more than he'd let on. The Romanos had run their bakery for 3 generations, surviving everything from the Great Depression to urban renewal. Their overnight disappearance spoke volumes about the level of threat the cartel presented. Marcus had seen similar patterns before, in places where criminal organizations systematically dismantled community resistance through a combination of money and fear. The vintage radio behind the counter played soft jazz, but Marcus was more focused on the sound of vehicles outside. His trained ear catalogued each passing engine, noting anything unusual or out of pattern. The black SUVs from earlier had made another pass, this time with different plates, an amateur mistake that confirmed his suspicions about their intentions. A group of high school students came in for their usual lunch break, laughing and joking. As they ordered sandwiches, Marcus served them with grandfatherly patience, his friendly smile masking the fact that he was simultaneously monitoring 3 different surveillance feeds and tracking movement patterns outside. The teenagers' presence complicated tactical scenarios. Civilian safety would be a primary concern if things escalated. The old building's heating system clicked and hummed, but beneath that familiar sound, Marcus detected the faint electronic whine of scanning equipment. Someone was attempting to map the building's layout remotely, probably using thermal imaging to identify security systems. He allowed himself a small smile. They'd find exactly what he wanted them to find. Detective Chen's motorcycle rumbled past again, her casual drive-by providing updates through prearranged signals. 2 fingers tapped on her helmet, more cartel vehicles spotted in the area. 3 quick rev patterns, they were setting up observation posts. The organized crime unit might be officially powerless, but Sarah had found ways to work within the system's constraints. Marcus's secure phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Frost. Team assembled. 6 hours out. Bastards won't know what hit them. The response brought both comfort and concern. Having his old unit together would be crucial, but their presence meant civilian casualties were no longer just a possibility, but a probability that needed to be carefully managed. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the deli's front windows as Marcus prepared for the afternoon rush. Each movement was carefully choreographed to appear natural while maintaining optimal positioning and situational awareness. The weight of his concealed carry holster was reassuring against his ribs, though he hoped it wouldn't be needed. Regular customers continued their normal patterns, unaware of the tactical assessment happening behind every friendly interaction. Marcus noted which ones might become potential complications in a firefight, mentally mapping escape routes that would protect civilian lives while channeling threats into prepared response zones. The vintage photographs on the walls showing 3 generations of Sullivan family history, concealed cutting-edge motion sensors. The restored tin ceiling tiles housed a network of thermal cameras. Every historic feature had been carefully modified to serve both its original aesthetic purpose and a tactical function. A young mother struggled through the door with a stroller, and Marcus moved to help her, using the opportunity to scan the street outside. More unfamiliar faces in parked cars, more watchers trying too hard to look casual. The cartel was building a detailed picture of the deli's routine, probably planning to move soon. The baby in the stroller grabbed at Marcus's apron strings, making him smile genuinely. Moments like these reminded him why he'd chosen this life. After retiring from Delta Force, the neighborhood, with its mix of old families and new businesses, represented everything he'd spent his career protecting. He'd be damned if he'd let criminals destroy it. Cipher's ears twitched at the sound of another vehicle approaching, but this one was familiar. Officer Rodriguez making his usual coffee stop. The young patrol officer was one of Sarah's trusted team members, providing additional surveillance while maintaining his normal beat. His seemingly casual conversation about local sports actually contained coded updates about cartel movements in the area. The afternoon light caught the brass fixtures of the antique cash register, momentarily creating a glare pattern that would make precision shooting from outside difficult. Marcus had positioned every reflective surface carefully, turning the deli's historic character into a sophisticated defensive system. The cartel's observers would be noting these features, but misinterpreting their true purpose. A delivery truck doubled parked outside, and Marcus watched through the windows as the driver argued with another motorist. The incident provided cover for him to evaluate the cartel's observation posts, 3 visible, probably 2 more hidden. Their positioning suggested professional training, but lacked the sophistication of top-tier operators. These were good soldiers, but not elite ones. The hidden room in the basement held enough firepower to handle multiple tactical teams, but Marcus hoped it wouldn't come to that. The best victories were the ones achieved without firing a shot, as he'd learned through decades of special operations experience. Sometimes the mere knowledge that you were prepared was enough to change the equation. The vintage floor tiles, salvaged from the building's original construction, had been relaid over a state-of-the-art pressure sensing system. Every footstep through the deli was mapped and analyzed, building patterns of normal customer movement that would make any tactical intrusion immediately apparent. The system had cost more than a year's profit, but as Marcus always said, you couldn't put a price on proper preparation. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus maintained his cover as a simple shopkeeper while conducting constant tactical assessment. Each customer interaction, each delivery, each passing vehicle was catalogued and analyzed. Patterns emerged, threats were evaluated, responses were planned. The weight he'd gained since leaving Delta Force worked to his advantage. No one looked at the heavy man behind the counter and saw a serious threat. "Mr. Sullivan, let me be direct," Vega continued, his polite tone barely masking predatory intent. "We're prepared to offer significantly above market value for your property. 7 million cash, more than generous for a delicatessen, even considering its historic character and strategic location." Marcus maintained his relaxed posture, using the conversation to buy time while studying their equipment. Radio earpieces, concealed body armor visible only to trained eyes, weapons chosen for concealability rather than stopping power. They expected minimal resistance. "Not interested in selling," Marcus replied, stroking Cipher's fur. "Property's been in my family." "Too long." Vega stepped closer, his cologne barely masking a predator's scent. "Perhaps I wasn't clear. This district is changing. Progress, you might say. You can benefit from this change or..." He let the threat hang in the air. Marcus's voice remained mild, even as he noted the subtle shift in the men's positions. They were establishing a capture formation, standard procedure for intimidation operations, or you might find the restaurant business becoming very difficult. Equipment breaks, health inspectors become concerned, accidents happen. Vega's smile never reached his eyes, especially to stubborn old men who don't recognize an opportunity when it's presented. Marcus allowed just a hint of steel to enter his voice. "Sounds like a threat, Mr. Vega." The cartel leader's eyes narrowed slightly at Marcus's use of his real name, a calculated slip to let them know he wasn't as ignorant as he appeared. One of the men by the entrance spoke rapidly in Spanish, something about the security systems being more sophisticated than expected. Through his peripheral vision, Marcus noted their hand positions, their sight lines, their subtle communications. Every movement told a story to someone who knew how to read it. Simply stating reality, Vega recovered smoothly. Change is coming. To this district, fighting it would be unwise. He produced a business card, heavy stock with raised lettering, a front company's details embossed in gold. "You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, the offer becomes significantly less generous." Marcus took the card, noting the familiar pattern of a cartel money laundering operation. "I'll sleep on it." Vega turned to leave but paused, looking at Cipher. Beautiful dog, Belgian Malinois, yes, such loyal animals. His tone darkened. Would be tragic if something happened to him. The threat sparked something cold in Marcus's eyes, a glimpse of the warrior beneath the shopkeeper's facade. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority that had once commanded America's most elite warriors in the world's deadliest combat zones. That would be a serious mistake. Something in his tone made Vega hesitate, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and genuine unease showed through. They had expected an easy mark, a simple shopkeeper. They could bully or buy. Instead, they'd caught a glimpse of something else entirely, something that set off deeply ingrained survival instincts. As the cartel members retreated to their vehicles, trying to maintain their confident swagger, Marcus watched through eyes that had seen 1,000 combat operations. They were well-trained, well-equipped, and absolutely unprepared for what was coming. Inside his deli, Marcus activated his real security system. Not the obvious cameras they'd spotted, but the military-grade surveillance network he'd integrated into every aspect of the historic building. Motion sensors monitored the perimeter, thermal imaging tracked vehicle movements, and encrypted communications channels stood ready. His secure phone vibrated with a message from Frost. Team assembled. 3 hours out. Marcus's response was brief. Make it 2. Company's already knocking. In his hidden command center, he pulled up detailed maps of the historic district. His property sat at a crucial junction, controlling access to multiple escape routes and offering clear lines of sight down 4 major streets. No wonder they wanted it. But the cartel's forces, despite their training, had made a critical error. In their surveillance, they'd focused on the obvious security measures while missing the true defensive preparations hidden in plain sight. The sound of the SUVs fading into the distance carried a note of finality. The next time they returned, it wouldn't be for negotiation. Marcus knew their type. They'd come in force, expecting to overwhelm a single overweight shopkeeper with superior numbers and firepower. Instead, they would learn why the Ghost Hunters had been the most feared counter-terrorism unit in modern warfare. Some skills never fade, and some warriors never truly retire. They just wait patiently for the day when their expertise is needed once again. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows, across Pike Street, Marcus began his preparations. The deli was about to serve a purpose its builders never imagined, and the cartel was about to learn that sometimes the deadliest predators are the ones that don't look threatening at all. The basement command center hummed with activity as Marcus reviewed surveillance footage of cartel movements throughout the district. His trained eye noted their systematic approach, the way they'd acquired properties in a precise pattern, establishing control over key transit routes. The acquisition of his deli would complete their network, giving them total control over the historic district's hidden infrastructure. A quiet beep from his security system alerted him to an approaching vehicle. Through his monitors, he recognized Jack Frost Martinez's battered work van navigating the back alley he'd designated for team arrivals. Frost had been his second-in-command during the Ghost Hunter's most critical operations, a master of urban warfare who could disappear in plain sight. Place looks different from the reconnaissance photos, Frost commented as Marcus met him in the basement. At 52, Frost moved with the same liquid grace that had made him legendary in special operations circles. His weathered face bore new lines, but his eyes retained their calculating intensity. Had time to make some improvements, Marcus replied, leading him to the command center. The screen showed multiple cartel vehicles conducting surveillance from distant positions. They're more persistent than I expected, Frost noted, studying the thermal imaging feeds. Been watching since they left. Marcus led him through the deli's hidden defensive measures, the reinforced walls concealed behind historic brick, the emergency exfiltration routes disguised as old service tunnels, the sophisticated surveillance system integrated into period architectural features. Every element of the building's historic character had been carefully modified to serve a tactical purpose. Another alert signaled the arrival of Lisa Hawk Thompson, their former reconnaissance specialist. Her modest Prius projected perfect civilian camouflage, but Marcus knew it contained enough tactical gear to outfit a small army. Perimeters already compromised, she announced without preamble, joining them at the command center. Found 4 observation devices on my way in. High-end stuff. Satellite uplink. They're not just watching, they're gathering pattern of life. Our data, Marcus nodded. Let them watch. Everything they see is what we want them to see. 2 more vehicles arrived in quick succession. Mike Tech Wilson's communications van disguised as a cable repair truck, followed by James Doc Anderson's medical response vehicle. The team's core members were assembling, falling into practiced routines despite the years since their last mission. Full tactical assessment, Marcus ordered, gathering them around the main display. Frost, what are we facing? Based on regional intelligence, Escobar's enforcement unit maintains a strength of approximately 35 operators, divided into 3 tactical teams. They've been methodical, using intimidation and force only when necessary. Their success rate is perfect. No failed. Acquisitions. Hawk pulled up surveillance photos on an adjacent screen. They're well-equipped. Latest generation thermal imaging, encrypted communications, heavy weapons disguised as construction equipment. Each tactical team has its own support structure. Medical, communications, logistics. They're preparing for a major operation. This district matters to them more than just another expansion, Marcus replied, spreading detailed maps across a secondary workstation. Because it's not just about territory. This intersection connects major smuggling routes, offers multiple escape options, and has perfect cover for legitimate business operations. They're not building a distribution network. They're establishing a forward operating base. Doc examined intelligence reports from local hospitals. Pattern of injuries in the area suggests they're escalating their tactics. Clean breaks, precision, trauma. They're sending messages to anyone who resists. "They're coming tonight," Frost stated with certainty. The 24-hour deadline was theater. They've already committed resources, positioned assets. They'll want to take advantage of the new moon. Marcus activated a hidden panel, revealing racks of specialized equipment. Then let's give them a proper welcome. Tech, surveillance countermeasures. Hawk reconnaissance points are already marked. I need eyes on every approach. Doc, triage station in the wine cellar. Frost, you're on infiltration control. The team moved with practiced efficiency, years of combat experience overriding the time spent in civilian life. Each member knew their role, understood their part in the larger operation. There was no need for extended briefings or detailed explanations. They'd conducted hundreds of missions together, facing worse odds in more hostile territories. One thing, Marcus added as they prepared to deploy, this isn't just about defending my property. Every business they've taken, every family they've terrorized, we're putting an end to it, permanently. The team paused, recognizing the tone. It was the voice that had led them through impossible missions, that had brought them all home when the odds said otherwise. Rules of engagement? Frost asked, checking his specialized equipment. We're on American soil, Marcus replied. Everything by the book. We disable, we contain, we document. Every action recorded, every response justified. When this is over, law enforcement gets a complete package, evidence that will dismantle their entire operation. Just like Kiev, Hawk smiled, remembering one of their most successful missions. Hide in plain sight. Let them think they're in control, then show them why the ghost hunters were never officially acknowledged. Because some operations are too precise, too perfect to be explained, Marcus finished. As his team dispersed to their positions, he made one final check of the deli's defenses. The vintage architectural features could be remotely controlled to create impassable barriers. The historic layout offered perfect firing positions. Every aspect of the building had been designed with this possibility in mind. Though he'd hoped never to need these features, through his monitors, he watched the cartel's surveillance teams adjusting their positions, preparing for what they thought would be a straightforward operation. They were about to learn that appearances could be deceiving and that some old soldiers never lose their edge. The sun began to set behind Portland's skyline, casting long shadows across Pike Street. In the gathering darkness, the ghost hunters prepared to remind the world why they had been the most feared counterterrorism unit in modern warfare. The evening air carried the aroma of fresh-baked bread as Marcus conducted his final perimeter check. Cipher moved silently beside him, the dog's behavior reflecting years of combat training. Through thermal imaging feeds displayed on his tactical eyepiece, Marcus tracked multiple cartel observation teams in the surrounding buildings. Their positions revealed their military background. Status report, Marcus subvocalized into his encrypted communication system. 3 primary observation posts established, Hawk's voice replied quietly. They're using standard special forces protocols, 2-man teams, overlapping fields of view. But they're getting sloppy, too confident. Found traces of energy bar wrappers, boot prints they didn't bother concealing. Overconfidence we can use, Marcus acknowledged. Tech, what's their communications pattern? Encrypted channels, but using predictable frequencies. They're rotating every 30 minutes. Standard military procedure. I can break their encryption, but something's odd. They're broadcasting more data than they need for simple surveillance. Marcus paused by the deli's front window, apparently examining the display case while actually studying a distant rooftop. They're not just watching. They're gathering data for a larger operation. Infiltration assessment confirmed. Frost's voice was barely a whisper. Found evidence of advanced teams testing our perimeter. They've mapped your regular patterns, identified what they think are weak points, but they missed the secondary security layer completely. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. The cartel's forces were professional, well-trained, but they were following standard military doctrine. They expected standard defenses, cameras, motion sensors, maybe some armed guards. They weren't looking for the sophisticated countermeasures hidden within the deli's historic infrastructure. Dock, medical preparations. Triage center established in the old cold storage room. Modified the space into a secure treatment area. If things go as planned, we'll have multiple subjects requiring immediate care, but nothing critical. Marcus reached the highest point of his building, overlooking the historic district below. In the distance, he could see the lights of other businesses, properties already taken by the cartel, their owners forced out through intimidation or violence. Each light represented a family displaced, a community damaged. New movement, Hawk. Reported suddenly. Vehicle convoy approaching from the south. These aren't surveillance teams, heavy vehicles, professional drivers. The enforcement unit is mobilizing their main force early. They're not waiting for the deadline. Thermal signatures suggest at least 30 operators. Heavy weapons. Frost. Confirmed. They're coming prepared for serious resistance. Marcus checked his watch. The sun would set in 45 minutes, providing perfect conditions for a night operation. The cartel forces were following their training, choosing the optimal time for assault. What they didn't realize was that every decision they made had been anticipated. Every advantage they sought was part of a larger trap. Tech, initiate Protocol Sierra, Marcus ordered. Let them think their communications are secure, but feed them what we want them to see. Ghost shadow response teams in position? Affirmative. 3 4-man teams hidden in the pre-selected points. They'll never see us coming. Marcus moved to the basement command center, where his monitors provided a complete view of the battlefield. The cartel's approach would funnel them through carefully prepared killing zones, areas where non-lethal takedowns could be executed with surgical precision. Remember, he reminded his team, these aren't foreign combatants. Every action is recorded, every response measured. We're not here to eliminate a threat. We're here to gather evidence and enable law enforcement to dismantle their entire operation. Just like Bangkok, Hawk commented, referring to one of their most successful missions. The target never realized they were being dismantled until it was too late. The convoy's engines echoed off historic brick buildings as the cartel's enforcement unit approached their objective. Through multiple camera feeds, Marcus watched their tactical deployment. Their formation was perfect, their movement disciplined. They were executing a textbook special forces operation. They're good, Frost observed. Different level from ordinary cartel soldiers. Good isn't enough, Marcus replied. Not against what we've prepared. Tech, are you recording all their communications? Every word, every transmission. When this is over, law enforcement will have a complete record of their operational structure. Command hierarchy and tactical procedures. The sun touched the western horizon, casting long shadows across Pike Street. In the growing darkness, the cartel's enforcement unit would be relying on their night vision equipment, thermal imaging, and sophisticated communications gear. Each of these advantages would soon become a liability. All teams, final positions, Marcus ordered. Remember your training. These men are professional soldiers. But they're fighting for money. We're fighting for something more important. The safety of this community, the right of people to live without fear. As his team acknowledged their readiness, Marcus made one final check of his tactical displays. Everything was in position. Years of planning, months of preparation, all leading to this moment. The cartel thought they were launching a surprise attack against an unprepared target. Instead, they were walking into one of the most sophisticated defensive operations ever conceived. "They'll study this operation for years," Frost commented. "Perfect example of asymmetric warfare." "Let them study it," Marcus replied. "Let them learn that some battles are won before the first shot is fired, that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who appears least threatening." The first vehicles reached his outer perimeter. The cartel's enforcement unit was about to learn why the Ghost Hunters had been the most effective counter-terrorism unit in history. Not because of their weapons or tactics, but because of their ability to turn an enemy's strength into a weakness. The night was about to become very educational for some very professional soldiers who had forgotten the first rule of combat: never underestimate your opponent. The cartel convoy approached Pike Street Deli with military precision, their vehicles maintaining perfect tactical spacing. Through his command center displays, Marcus watched Vega's enforcement unit deploy their forces according to standard Special Forces protocols. Their commander had exchanged his business suit for tactical gear that revealed his professional military background. Multiple teams moving into position, Hawk reported from her observation post. 4-man cells, coordinated movement. They're setting up a textbook perimeter containment formation. These men have done this before. Marcus tracked their deployment through his tactical displays. The cartel's enforcement unit was executing a perfect encirclement, establishing overlapping fields of fire while positioning sniper teams on the surrounding rooftops. Their coordination spoke of extensive training and combat experience. They're using NATO standard operating procedures, Frost observed. Former Special Forces training showing through. Vega must have received American military education at some point. Confirmed, Tech responded, analyzing data streams. Intercepted communications show precise command and control structure. These aren't cartel thugs playing soldier, they're professional military operators working for criminal enterprises. Through high-resolution cameras, Marcus watched Vega directing his men with practiced hand signals. The cartel commander had positioned himself at a tactical command post with clear views of all approach vectors. His operation was methodical, disciplined, and completely predictable to anyone who had written the manual he was following. Thermal imaging shows 32. Operators in total, Hawk updated. Heavy weapons teams setting up support positions. They're preparing for serious resistance. Let them prepare, Marcus replied calmly. Every position they take, every defensive measure they establish, they're walking right into our response matrix. The cartel's enforcement unit had divided their forces into 3 main elements: a primary assault team, a containment force, and a tactical reserve. Their deployment followed perfect military doctrine for taking a fortified position. What they didn't realize was that every optimal position they sought had been prepared specifically to be attractive to trained operators. "Sir," Tech interrupted, "intercepting interesting communications. They're deploying electronic warfare equipment, trying to jam our communications, disable security systems." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "Initiate protocol Echo. Let them think it's working." Across the historic building, carefully prepared electronic countermeasures activated. The cartel's sophisticated jamming equipment reported success, creating a false sense of superiority. In reality, the ghost hunters' actual communications remained secure and unaffected. Status of their reconnaissance elements? Marcus queried. 4 two-man teams moving through the building's periphery, Hawk reported. They're good, using the architecture for cover, maintaining proper intervals, looking for defense positions. Ghost shadow teams in position? Affirmative, Frost replied. Ready to execute on your mark. They'll never know what hit them. Marcus studied his tactical displays, watching the cartel's forces move deeper into his prepared response zones. Their advance was professional, methodical, and completely unaware of the true nature of their situation. They were executing a perfect military operation against what they believed was a civilian target with basic security measures. Doc, medical preparations? Confirmed. Ready for multiple casualties. Non-lethal takedowns only, as planned. Everything documented for law enforcement review. Through his thermal imaging, Marcus watched Vega deploy his final elements. The cartel's enforcement unit had established what they believed was tactical superiority, control of high ground, overlapping fields of fire, and electronic dominance. Their confidence was evident in their communications, their movements showing the smooth precision of experienced operators. All teams, prepare for Phase 1, Marcus ordered. Remember, we're not just defending property here. We're defending the concept that ordinary citizens can stand against organized crime, that communities don't have to surrender to intimidation and violence. His team acknowledged with practiced efficiency. Each member understood their role in the complex operation about to unfold. They had spent careers conducting missions that reshaped conflicts without leaving evidence of their involvement. Tonight, they would demonstrate that expertise on American soil, protecting American citizens. Movement at the main entrance, Hawk reported. Vega is deploying his primary assault element, standard 3-team formation, breach specialists in the lead. Marcus watched through multiple camera feeds as the cartel's enforcement unit began their final approach. Their movement was textbook perfect, exactly as he had anticipated when designing his defensive preparations. Each step they took followed established military doctrine, making their actions completely predictable to someone who had helped write those doctrines. They're about to learn the difference between soldiers and warriors, Frost commented quietly. Between following procedures and understanding the art of combat. Let them come, Marcus replied, initiating the first phase of his response plan. Let them think they have control of this situation. Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to let them defeat themselves. The night was about to demonstrate why the Ghost Hunters had been the most effective counterterrorism unit in history. Not because of their weapons or tactics, but because of their understanding that true combat mastery meant turning an enemy's strength into a weakness. The cartel's enforcement unit was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The deli's historic sprinkler system, activated without warning, strategically placed nozzles creating zones of reduced visibility that disrupted the cartel's carefully planned formations. Their night vision equipment, calibrated for optimal darkness, suddenly became a liability as water droplets scattered their infrared imaging. Electronic warfare teams reporting total signal loss, Tech announced, monitoring the cartel's communications. They think their own jamming equipment is malfunctioning, confusion spreading through their command structure. Marcus watched through his command center as the cartel's perfect military formation began to show its first cracks. Their training told them to maintain position and wait for clarification from command. That disciplined response was exactly what he had anticipated. Status of their sniper teams: completely compromised, Hawk reported. The water's creating a diffraction effect in their thermal scopes. They've lost effective coverage of the approach zones. Vega's voice crackled across their monitored communications, his professional demeanor showing the first signs of strain. All teams maintain position. Electronic warfare unit report status. Phase 1 achieving desired effect, Frost reported from his concealed position. Their formation is fragmenting exactly as predicted. Permission to initiate Phase 2. Marcus studied his tactical displays, watching the cartel's operators trying to adapt to the deteriorating conditions. Their training was working against them, making them hesitate when they should be retreating, keeping them in position when they should be moving. Execute Phase 2, Marcus commanded. Show them why some battles are won before the first shot is fired. Across the historic building, carefully prepared defensive measures activated in sequence. The terrain that the cartel's enforcement unit had evaluated as perfect for their assault suddenly began working against them. Hidden drainage systems redirected to create impassable zones, architectural features that had offered perfect firing. Positions became dangerously unstable. Sir, Tech interrupted, intercepting their tactical analysis. They're starting to realize this isn't normal building infrastructure. Let them realize, Marcus replied. Understanding comes too late sometimes. The cartel's advanced teams found themselves isolated, their carefully planned routes of approach suddenly blocked by seemingly natural obstacles. Their tactical advantages evaporated one by one, each position they'd secured becoming a potential trap. Multiple teams requesting permission to withdraw and regroup, Hawk reported, monitoring their communications. Vega is refusing. He's ordering them to push forward despite deteriorating conditions. Marcus nodded, having anticipated this response. Professional pride would prevent the cartel commander from abandoning an operation simply because of unexpected complications. His training would demand that he press the advantage of superior numbers and firepower. Ghost, prepare shadow teams for close intervention. They're about to make their critical mistake. Vega's voice crackled across their monitored channels again, frustration evident in his tone. All teams, aggressive advance. I want that building secured in the next 10 minutes. Use whatever force necessary. They're committing their reserves, Frost observed. Full tactical press exactly as predicted. Marcus watched the cartel's forces begin their final advance. Their formation was now more aggressive but less coordinated, the professional discipline that had marked their initial approach eroding under pressure and frustration. All teams, execute Phase 3, Marcus ordered. Remember, precision over power. We're not just winning a battle here. We're teaching a lesson about the true nature of combat expertise. The Ghost Hunter's response was immediate and devastating. Years of conducting the world's most sensitive counter-terrorism operations had taught them that true victory often came without firing a shot. Tonight, they would demonstrate that expertise. Frost's shadow teams moved like wraiths through the confusion, targeting the cartel's command and control structure. Communications equipment failed mysteriously. Key leaders found themselves suddenly isolated from their units. The cartel's sophisticated military operation began to unravel from within. Sir, Tech reported, their tactical network is completely compromised. Unit commanders can't coordinate, support teams are operating blind. Through his displays, Marcus watched the cartel's perfect military operation dissolve into chaos. Their training told them to seek clear lines of communication, to establish rally points, to follow standard operating procedures. Each of these responses led them deeper into prepared containment zones. Multiple teams reporting equipment failures, Hawk updated. Night vision, communications, even basic tactical gear. They're starting to realize these aren't random malfunctions. Vega's voice, when it came across their monitored channels, carried the first notes of genuine fear. What are we dealing with here? This isn't normal civilian security. Now they begin to understand, Marcus commented quietly. The difference between soldiers who follow procedures and warriors who understand the art of combat. The night was demonstrating why the Ghost Hunters had been the military's most effective counter-terrorism unit, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through their mastery of turning an enemy's strength against them. The Cartel's enforcement unit had come expecting to overwhelm a civilian target with military precision. Instead, they were learning that some old soldiers never lose their edge. They just learn to hide it better. The cartel's operation continued to deteriorate as the Ghost Hunters executed their precisely orchestrated defense. Marcus monitored multiple tactical displays from his command center, watching Vega's forces struggle against an enemy they couldn't identify or engage. "Sir, Eastern Sector reporting complete communications blackout," Tech announced. "Their backup channels are compromised. Unit commanders operating blind. No coordination between teams." Through high-resolution thermal imaging, Marcus tracked Vega attempting to regain control of his fragmenting force. The cartel commander had withdrawn to what he believed was a secure position, surrounded by his best operators. His training was evident in how he responded to the crisis. Textbook military procedures for compromised operations. Status of their perimeter teams completely isolated, Hawk reported. Ghost's shadow teams have them contained in predetermined sectors. They think they're maintaining tactical positions, but they're actually trapped in our response zones. Marcus studied the tactical situation with the expertise gained from decades of counterterrorism command. The cartel's enforcement unit had committed their forces according to perfect military doctrine, which made their responses entirely predictable to someone who understood the deeper principles of asymmetric warfare. Vega is initiating their contingency protocols, Frost reported from his concealed position. Standard Special Forces recovery procedures. He's trying to consolidate his remaining effective units. "Let him try," Marcus responded. "Sometimes the best trap is letting your opponent think they're escaping." As the cartel's forces began a coordinated withdrawal to pre-planned rally points, their movement showing the discipline of professional military training, what they didn't realize was that each rally point had been identified and prepared long before they arrived. "Doc, status of medical preparations." "We're approaching the critical phase. Triage center fully equipped, ready for multiple incoming. Non-lethal interventions only, as planned. Everything documented for law enforcement review." Through his command feeds, Marcus watched the cartel's operators execute what should have been a perfect tactical retreat. Their movement was precise, their coverage overlapping, their security protocols exactly as taught in Special Forces training. Each textbook response led them deeper into the Ghost Hunters' prepared response matrix. "Sir," Tech interrupted, intercepting significant command traffic. Vega is calling for their reserve force, heavy weapons teams, additional operators. They're treating this as a major military engagement. Of course they are, Marcus replied. Professional soldiers rely on superior force when faced with an unknown threat. It's what makes them predictable. The night demonstrated why the Ghost Hunters had been the military's most effective counter-terrorism unit. They didn't just understand tactics and procedures. They understood the psychology of combat, the way trained soldiers would respond to systematic pressure. Multiple thermal signatures approaching from the south, Hawk reported. Their reinforcements are arriving. Heavy vehicles, probably armored. They're not taking chances anymore. Marcus watched the new forces deploy through his tactical displays. The cartel's enforcement unit was committing everything they had, transforming a simple property seizure into a full military operation. Their response was exactly what he had anticipated when designing his defensive strategy. All teams prepare for Phase 4, Marcus ordered. Remember, we're not just defending property here. We're demonstrating why some battles are won through wisdom rather than force. The Ghost Hunters acknowledged with practiced efficiency. Each member understood their role in the complex operation unfolding across the historic building. Years of conducting the world's most sensitive missions had taught them that true victory often came through understanding rather than confrontation. Sir, Frost reported, their new forces are deploying in standard combat formation. Heavy weapons. Teams establishing fire support positions. They're preparing for a major assault. Marcus nodded, watching the cartel's reinforcements move into what they believed were tactically advantageous positions. Their training told them to establish superior firepower, to control key terrain, to dominate the battlefield through force. Each of these standard military responses played directly into his prepared countermeasures. Let them come, Marcus directed. Let them commit everything they have. Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to let them defeat themselves through their own assumptions. The night was about to demonstrate why some old soldiers never truly retire. They just learn to fight smarter rather than harder. You see, Cartel's enforcement unit had brought their best operators, their heaviest weapons, their most sophisticated equipment. All of it would prove useless against an opponent who understood that true combat mastery meant turning an enemy's strength into a weakness. Phase 4 authorized, Marcus commanded. Show them why the Ghost Hunters were never officially acknowledged. Some operations are too perfect to be explained. The historic building was about to become a classroom for some very professional soldiers who had forgotten the most important lesson of warfare. Never assume you understand the full capabilities of your opponent. Phase 4 initiated with a synchronized cascade of carefully orchestrated events. The building's historic steam heating system, already utilized for tactical advantage, suddenly shifted into its secondary configuration. Previously stable ground became treacherous as hidden mechanisms activated, creating impassable zones that split the cartel's reinforcements into isolated sectors. Heavy vehicles compromised, Hawk reported from her observation post. Their armored units are losing mobility, terrain denial measures functioning exactly as designed. Marcus watched through multiple tactical feeds as the cartel's reinforcements struggled to maintain their military formation. Their heavy weapons teams, positioned for maximum fire support, found themselves unable to establish stable firing positions as the ground beneath them continuously shifted. "Sir!" Tech called out, intercepting their tactical analysis. They're beginning to realize this isn't normal building infrastructure. Vega is ordering a full-spectrum electronic scan of the property. Let them scan, Marcus replied. Sometimes, the most effective deception is hiding in plain sight. The cartel's sophisticated scanning equipment detected exactly what Marcus had planned for them to find. Evidence of military-grade security systems, professional defensive preparations, everything they would expect from a well-protected civilian facility. What their scans missed was the true sophistication of the Ghost Hunters' integrated defense network. Ghost, state of infiltration teams, in position and undetected, Frost replied. Their security protocols are breaking down, too focused on looking for traditional military threats to notice subtle penetration. Through high-resolution cameras, Marcus observed Vega directing his forces with increasing frustration. The cartel commander's professional training was evident in how he responded to the deteriorating situation. Textbook military procedures that played directly into the Ghost Hunters' prepared responses. Multiple teams reporting equipment malfunctions. Hawk updated. Their night vision systems are compromised, communication gear failing systematically. They're starting to bunch up, losing tactical spacing. Initiate containment protocols, Marcus ordered. Show them why some battles are won through precision rather than power. Across the historic building, carefully prepared defensive measures activated in sequence. The cartel's enforcement unit found themselves channeled into predetermined zones, their tactical options systematically reduced by seemingly natural obstacles. Their military training worked against them, making them respond in predictable ways to each new challenge. "Sir," Tech reported, "intercepting interesting chatter. Their operators are starting to recognize military-grade countermeasures. They think they're dealing with an official government installation." Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. Let them think that. Sometimes the best defense is letting your opponent convince themselves they understand the situation. The cartel's reinforcements, equipped with the latest military hardware, found their sophisticated equipment becoming a liability. Electronic warfare systems reported conflicting data. Thermal imaging showed phantom heat signatures. Every piece of advanced technology they relied on provided misleading information. "They're adapting," Frost observed, switching to basic infantry tactics, trying to reduce their technological vulnerability. "Vega's smarter than we anticipated." "Not smart enough," Marcus responded. "They're still thinking like soldiers when they need to think like survivors." The night continued to demonstrate why the Ghost Hunters had been the military's most effective counter-terrorism unit. They didn't just understand tactics and technology. They understood how to make an enemy's training work against them. Multiple teams attempting to establish new rally points, Hawk reported. They're abandoning their heavy equipment, going light and mobile, starting to realize their superior firepower is actually a disadvantage. Marcus watched through his tactical displays as the cartel's forces began to fragment. Their coordinated military operation was dissolving into smaller, independent units, exactly as he had planned. Each group trying to operate autonomously moved, precisely where the Ghost Hunters' defense matrix directed them. "Sir," Doc called in, "medical team standing by. Monitoring their communications suggests increasing stress levels among their operators. They're starting to make mistakes." "Prepare for Phase 5, Marcus commanded. "Remember, we're not just defending property here. We're teaching a lesson about the true nature of combat expertise." The Ghost Hunters acknowledged with practiced efficiency. Years of conducting the world's most sensitive counter-terrorism operations had taught them that victory often came through understanding rather than confrontation. Tonight they would demonstrate that expertise. Ghost, prepare for close intervention. They're about to make their critical error. Through his command center, Marcus watched the cartel's forces continue to degrade. Their military precision, their tactical advantages, their superior numbers, all of it meant nothing against an opponent who understood the deeper principles of asymmetric warfare. "Sir," Tech reported, intercepting Vega's communications with their headquarters. He's requesting emergency extraction, claims they're facing a superior military force with unknown capabilities. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Let them think that. Sometimes the most effective deception is letting your enemy create their own explanations for defeat. The final phase was about to demonstrate why some old soldiers never lose their edge. They just learn to hide it better. The cartel's enforcement unit had come expecting to overwhelm a civilian target with military precision. Instead, they were receiving a masterclass in why the most dangerous predators are often the ones that don't appear threatening. All teams execute final containment protocol, Marcus ordered. Show them why the ghost hunters were never officially acknowledged. Some operations are too perfect to explain through conventional military understanding. The night was about to teach a lesson in warfare that would be studied for years, though few would ever know the true story of how a small team of retired operators had systematically dismantled one of the most dangerous cartel units in history. All without firing a single lethal shot. The cartel's enforcement unit was about to learn that sometimes the most effective defense isn't in weapons or tactics, but in understanding how to make an enemy defeat themselves through their own training and expectations. The final phase, initiated with a carefully orchestrated sequence that targeted the cartel's psychological breaking point. Years of counter-terrorism. Experience had taught Marcus that even the most hardened military units had a moment when training gave way to basic survival instinct. All sectors reporting complete chaos, Hawk transmitted from her observation post. Their formation is collapsing from the inside out. Combat veterans turning on their own equipment convinced it's been compromised. Through his command center's displays, Marcus watched Vega desperately trying to maintain control of his disintegrating force. The cartel commander's military training had become a liability, making him search for logical explanations where none existed. "Sir," Tech reported, monitoring enemy communications. Their tactical net is filled with conflicting reports. Some teams claim they're being attacked by invisible forces, others reporting American Special Forces presence, a few even, suggesting supernatural intervention. Fear, Marcus noted, becomes exponential when professional soldiers can't trust their training. Everything they relied on becomes suspect. The ghost hunters' systematic dismantling of the cartel's operation was approaching its culmination. Each carefully prepared element had contributed to this moment, when highly trained operators would begin to question everything they thought they knew about combat. Ghost team reporting successful penetration of their inner security. Frost's voice came quietly. They're so focused on external threats, they've completely missed our internal presence. Marcus studied his tactical displays, watching the psychological collapse spread through the cartel's forces. Their tight military formation had devolved into scattered groups, each believing they were under attack from different directions. "Doc, prepare for mass submission. They're about to break." "Medical teams ready, sir." expecting multiple cases of acute combat stress reaction. These men are experiencing something their training never prepared them for. Through high-resolution thermal imaging, Marcus tracked Vega as the commander made his final tactical error. Gathering his remaining trusted operators, he began to move toward what he believed was their best escape route, directly into the Ghost Hunter's primary containment zone. Status of the containment matrix? Fully operational, Hawk reported. Every route they might take leads to prepared intervention points. They're not escaping, they're just choosing how they want to be captured. The night was demonstrating why psychological warfare, when properly executed, could be more effective than any weapon. The cartel's enforcement unit had come prepared for physical combat, but found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see, understand, or effectively resist. "Sir," Tech interrupted, intercepting fascinating command communications. Vega is reporting to cartel leadership that they're facing some kind of classified military operation, claims the building must be a secret government facility. "Let them believe what they need to," Marcus replied. "Sometimes the best cover story is the one your enemy creates for themselves." The Ghost Hunter's final containment protocol activated with precision timing. The cartel's remaining operators, already psychologically compromised, found themselves facing what appeared to be evidence of an overwhelming force. Carefully positioned lights created the illusion of multiple teams moving through the building. Acoustic devices simulated communications and movement from impossible directions. "They're breaking," Frost reported. "Even their elite teams are losing tactical cohesion. Combat veterans with years of experience are freezing up, unable to process what they're experiencing." Marcus watched through multiple feeds as the cartel's professional military operation completely unraveled. Their sophisticated equipment became useless, their tactical training irrelevant, their numerical superiority meaningless against an enemy that seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere. "All teams execute final containment," Marcus ordered. "Remember, we're not just stopping a cartel operation. We're creating a legend that will make others think twice before targeting innocent communities." The historic building had become more than a battlefield. It was now a demonstration of why some victories are won through wisdom rather than force. The cartel's enforcement unit had brought everything they thought they needed for success: superior numbers, advanced technology, professional training. All of it proved useless against defenders who understood that true combat mastery meant making an enemy defeat themselves. "Sir," Hawk reported, "Vega is attempting one final reorganization. He's gathered his most experienced operators for what looks like a desperate breakout attempt." "Let them try," Marcus commanded. "Sometimes the most effective lesson is letting your enemy exhaust themselves fighting shadows." The night was about to demonstrate why the Ghost Hunters had been the most feared counter-terrorism unit in modern warfare. Their expertise wasn't just in combat. It was in understanding how to make an enemy's greatest strengths become their most devastating weaknesses. The final moments of Operation Deli were about to unfold, teaching a lesson that would resonate through criminal organizations across the continent. Some targets aren't worth the cost of attacking, and some old soldiers never lose their edge. They just learn to hide it better. Vega's last-ditch breakout attempt unfolded exactly as Marcus had anticipated. The cartel commander had gathered his 20 most experienced operators, men with proven combat records, for what he believed would be a concentrated push through the building's weakest point. "Sir, they're moving into position," Hawk reported from her observation post. Standard combat stack, 3-team formation. These are their best. Former Special Forces, combat veterans. They're done playing by conventional rules. Through his command center's displays, Marcus watched the desperate preparation with the calm assessment of someone who had orchestrated similar operations across the globe. The cartel's elite operators checked their weapons, synchronized their communications, prepared for what they thought would be a conventional military breakthrough. Tech, what are their communications telling us? They've switched to analog channels, hand signals, learning from their earlier mistakes. Vega is adapting. He's finally starting to understand this isn't a normal tactical situation. Marcus nodded, approvingly. Too late for understanding. Sometimes the most dangerous moment is when your enemy starts to learn, but hasn't learned enough. The Ghost Hunter's defensive matrix had been designed for exactly this scenario. Every apparent weakness was a carefully crafted invitation. Every seeming vulnerability, a precisely prepared trap. Ghost team in position, Frost whispered through the secure channel. Their movement is professional but predictable. They're following standard escape and evasion protocols, exactly what we planned for. Through thermal imaging, Marcus tracked Vega's elite team as they began their advance. Their movement was textbook perfect, utilizing cover, maintaining proper intervals, watching each other's sectors. Everything they had been trained to do was leading them precisely where Marcus wanted them. Doc, status of medical preparations? Ready? Or multiple incoming? These men will fight harder than the others. Expect more resistance-related injuries. Still keeping everything non-lethal, but they're going to make us work for it. The night was about to demonstrate why the Ghost Hunters had been so effective. Their expertise wasn't just in combat tactics, but in understanding how to use an enemy's professional training against them. Initiate containment sequence Delta, Marcus commanded. Show them why some battles are won through understanding rather than force. Across the historic building, carefully prepared defensive measures activated in precise sequence. The terrain that the cartel's operators had carefully scouted suddenly became treacherous. Hidden mechanisms activated, turning solid ground into impossible barriers. Architectural features that offered perfect cover became exposed killing zones under pre-positioned illumination. Sir, Tech reported, their tactical cohesion is still impressive. Vega has them operating in buddy teams, maintaining unit integrity despite the changing conditions. Professional soldiers, Marcus observed, always fall back on their training under stress. That's what makes them predictable. The Ghost Hunter's response was methodical and precise. Years of conducting the world's most sensitive counter-terrorism operations had taught them that true victory often came through manipulation rather than confrontation. Multiple teams attempting to establish new rally points, Hawk updated. They're adapting to the terrain changes, but each adaptation takes them deeper into our prepared response zones. Marcus watched through his tactical displays as the cartel's elite operators maneuvered through what they thought was their best chance at escape. Their training told them to seek high ground, establish clear fields of fire, maintain tactical superiority. Each decision, based on sound military doctrine, played directly into the Ghost Hunter's hands. All teams prepare for close intervention, Marcus ordered. Remember, these are their best operators. They won't break easily. We need to show them why some threats are beyond conventional military response. The historic building had become more than a battlefield. It was now a demonstration of why psychological warfare, properly executed, could overcome even the most hardened combat veterans. "Sir," Frost reported, "they're approaching the primary containment zone. Vega has them moving in a modified diamond formation. He's expecting resistance from all directions." "Initiate final protocol," Marcus commanded. "Let's show them why the ghost hunters were never officially acknowledged. Some operations are too perfect to be explained through conventional military understanding." The knight was about to demonstrate why some old soldiers never truly retire. They just learn to fight smarter rather than harder. The cartel's enforcement unit had brought their elite operators, their best tactical minds, their most experienced combat veterans. All of it would prove useless against defenders who understood that true combat mastery meant making an enemy defeat themselves through their own expertise. The final confrontation was about to begin, and with it, a lesson in warfare that would be studied in secret briefings and classified reports for years to come. Though few would ever know the true story of how a small team of retired operators had systematically dismantled one of the most dangerous cartel units in the hemisphere, all while making it look like nothing more than a failed attempt to intimidate a simple deli owner. The historic building was about to become a legend in the criminal underworld. A story whispered about why some targets should never be approached, no matter how vulnerable they might appear. Operation Deli's final phase was about to demonstrate why the most dangerous predators are often the ones that don't appear threatening until it's too late. Vega's elite team encountered their first real challenge 300 yards into their breakout attempt. The night erupted in carefully orchestrated chaos as the ghost hunters activated their final defensive protocols. "Multiple targets engaging," Hawk reported from her observation post. "Their formation is holding, but they're starting to show stress fractures. Even elite operators have breaking points." Through his command center's displays, Marcus watched as the cartel's best operators encountered something their extensive training hadn't prepared them for. An enemy that seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "Sir," Tech interrupted, "monitoring their communications. They've gone completely silent. No radio traffic, no hand signals. Vega is leading them based purely on combat instinct now." "That's when they're most dangerous," Marcus noted. "When professional soldiers stop relying on training and start relying on survival instincts, execute Phase Omega." The building's defensive matrix shifted into its final configuration. Hidden speakers activated in sequence, creating an acoustic maze that made it impossible to determine the direction of any sound. Thermal deflectors scattered their imaging equipment's readings, making every shadow appear to hold potential threats. "Ghost, team in position," Frost whispered. "They're bunching up, losing tactical spacing. Fear is starting to override their training." Marcus tracked their movement through multiple camera feeds. Even now, their professional background showed through. The way they checked corners, maintained security, watched each other's sectors. But there was a growing desperation to their actions, a realization that they were facing something beyond their experience. "Doc, prepare for incoming. When they break, they'll break hard." "Medical teams ready, sir. These men will resist longer than the others. But when they surrender, they'll need immediate stress treatment. Combat veterans don't handle loss of control." Well, the night continued to demonstrate why the ghost hunters had been so effective. Their expertise wasn't just in combat tactics, but in understanding the psychology of elite operators under extreme stress. "Status of containment zones?" Marcus queried. "Fully operational," Hawk reported. Every route they might take leads to prepared intervention points. They're not escaping, they're choosing their method of capture. Through thermal imaging, Marcus watched Vega make his final tactical mistake. The cartel commander, spotting what he thought was a weakness in the building's defenses, directed his team toward what appeared to be an unguarded sector. "They're taking the bait," Frost reported, "moving exactly where we want them. These men are good. Their instincts are telling them it's a trap, but they have no other options." Marcus nodded, watching the elite team move with practiced precision toward their own defeat. Sometimes the most effective trap is the one your enemy walks into despite knowing it's there. The Ghost Hunter's final containment protocol activated with surgical timing. The cartel's remaining operators found themselves caught in a series of interlocking non-lethal targeting zones, each designed to neutralize without causing permanent harm. "Sir," Tech reported, "their tactical net is dead silent. Total communication, blackout. They're operating on pure instinct now." "That's when we have them," Marcus replied. "When professional soldiers lose their protocols, their training becomes a liability rather than an asset." The historic building had become more than a battlefield. It was now a demonstration of why some victories are achieved through psychology rather than firepower. The cartel's elite operators had brought everything their training told them they needed: advanced tactics, superior equipment, proven combat experience. All of it proved useless against defenders who understood that true combat mastery meant making an enemy defeat themselves. Multiple targets showing acute stress response, Doc reported through the tactical net. Even their most experienced operators are displaying signs of psychological breakdown. Marcus watched through his displays as the cartel's final resistance began to crumble. Their tight formation, once a testament to professional military training, had devolved into a scattered group of individuals fighting shadows. "All teams, execute final containment," Marcus ordered. "Remember, we're not just stopping cartel operators. We're creating a message that will echo through criminal organizations across the continent." The night was about to demonstrate why the Ghost Hunters had been the most feared counter-terrorism unit in modern warfare. Their expertise wasn't just in combat. It was in understanding how to make an enemy's greatest strengths become their most devastating weaknesses. Vega and his elite team were about to learn the hardest lesson in warfare. Sometimes the most dangerous. Opponent isn't the one with superior firepower or advanced training, but the one who understands how to turn your own expertise against you. The final moments of Operation Deli were about to unfold, teaching a lesson that would be whispered about in criminal circles for years to come. Some targets aren't worth the cost, and some old soldiers never lose their edge. They just learn to hide it better until it's needed. The culmination of Operation Deli unfolded with methodical precision as the cartel's elite team found themselves facing the ultimate realization: their military expertise had become their greatest vulnerability. "Final containment zone activated," Hawk reported. "They're completely surrounded, but not in any way they can comprehend. Every sensor they have is telling them something different." Marcus watched through his command screens as Vega and his remaining operators tried to make sense of their situation. The cartel commander had positioned his men in a defensive circle, their backs to each other. A textbook response that played perfectly into the Ghost Hunters' strategy. Ghost team status of infiltration. "Already inside their perimeter," Frost whispered. They're so focused on external threats, they haven't noticed we're among them. Combat stress is affecting their close-quarter awareness. Through high-resolution thermal imaging, Marcus tracked individual operators as their professional composure began to crack. These were men who had faced firefights, urban warfare, and high-stakes military operations. Yet here they were being systematically unmade by an enemy they couldn't identify or engage. "Sir," Tech reported, analyzing their vital signs through advanced sensors. Their biological readings are fascinating. Heart rates elevated, adrenaline spiking. Their bodies are reacting to threats their training can't process. "Initiate sonic warfare final sequence," Marcus commanded. "Let's show them why psychological dominance beats tactical superiority." The building's acoustic matrix activated in its ultimate configuration. Carefully positioned speakers created a three-dimensional sound environment that defied military training. Footsteps seemed to come from impossible directions. Whispers emerged from empty air. Equipment sounds echoed from nowhere and everywhere. Multiple targets showing severe disorientation, Doc updated. Their combat experience is actually amplifying the psychological impact. They know enough to recognize how impossible this situation is. Marcus nodded, watching the elite team's formation continue to deteriorate. That's the breaking point for professional soldiers, when their expertise tells them they're facing something that shouldn't exist. The Ghost Hunters' final phase demonstrated why they had been the military's most effective counter-terrorism unit. Their approach wasn't about overwhelming force or superior tactics. It was about understanding how to turn an enemy's strengths into weaknesses. "Sir," Hawk called out, "Vega is attempting one last coordinated action, gathering his most stable operators for what looks like a suicide charge." "Let them come," Marcus replied. "Sometimes the most effective lesson is letting your enemy exhaust their last hope." Through multiple camera feeds, Marcus watched as the cartel's commander led his final desperate assault. Their movements still showed their professional background, coordinated, disciplined, precise, but it was the precision of men fighting against their own growing terror. "Ghost Team, prepare for close intervention. Remember, these men are dangerous, precisely because they've nothing left to lose." The building's defensive matrix shifted one last time, creating a corridor that seemed to offer escape, but actually led deeper into the Ghost Hunters' prepared response zones. Every step the cartel operators took was guided by their own training, their own instincts, their own desperate need to find a solution their military experience could understand. "They've crossed the primary threshold," Tech reported. "All targeting systems are locked. They're exactly where we need them." Marcus watched the final moments approach with the calm assessment of someone who had orchestrated similar operations across the globe. The cartel's enforcement unit had brought their best. Elite operators, advanced equipment, proven tactics. All of it was about to prove meaningless against defenders who understood that true combat mastery meant making an enemy defeat themselves. "All teams execute endgame protocol," Marcus ordered. "Show them why some battles are won through wisdom rather than warfare." The night erupted in a precisely choreographed sequence of non-lethal interventions. Every technique the Ghost Hunters had perfected through decades of counter-terrorism operations came into play. Not to destroy their opponents, but to dismantle their will to fight. "Multiple targets neutralized," Frost reported clinically. "They're not even resisting anymore. These men have reached their psychological breaking point." Marcus watched through his displays as the cartel's final resistance collapsed. Their training Their experience, their professional pride, all of it crumbled in the face of something they couldn't fight or understand. "Sir," Doc called out, "we're going to need immediate stress treatment for several subjects. Even hardened combat veterans can break when their fundamental understanding of warfare is challenged." The historic building had become more than a battlefield. It was now a testament to why some victories are achieved through understanding rather than force. The cartel's elite operators had brought everything their training told them they needed, only to discover that their greatest assets had become their most crippling liabilities. Operation Deli's final moments were about to demonstrate why the Ghost Hunters had been the most effective counter-terrorism unit in modern warfare, not because of their combat skills, but because of their understanding that true victory often comes from making an enemy defeat themselves. The night was about to become a legend in the criminal underworld, a story whispered as a warning. Some targets aren't worth the cost, and some old soldiers never lose their edge. They just learn to hide it better until it's needed. As dawn began to paint the eastern sky in shades of amber, Marcus surveyed the results of Operation Deli from his command center. The cartel's enforcement unit lay thoroughly neutralized, their operators secured and receiving medical attention for the psychological trauma they'd endured. "Final count," Hawk reported, completing her detailed assessment. 35 operators captured, including Vega and his entire command staff. All their equipment secured and documented, 0 fatalities, minimal physical injuries. Marcus watched through his monitors as Doc's medical team treated the shell-shocked cartel operators. These were men who had conducted military operations across multiple continents, yet they sat in silent shock, their professional composure completely shattered. "Sir!" Tech called out, analyzing the captured communications equipment. "Their tactical data is a goldmine. Complete operational records, command structures, connection to other cartel activities. Law enforcement will have everything they need for a comprehensive takedown. Ghost team reporting final sector clear." Frost's voice came through the secure channel. Their equipment caches located and secured. They brought enough firepower for a small war. Through high-resolution feeds, Marcus observed Detective Chen's convoy approaching the deli. He had contacted her an hour ago after the operation was complete, providing just enough information to ensure proper law enforcement response. "Status of our guests? All subjects stable but severely traumatized," Doc reported. "These men have experienced something their training never prepared them for. It's fascinating from a psychological perspective. Elite operators completely unmade by an enemy they couldn't identify or engage." Marcus moved from his command center to meet Sarah as her vehicles approached. The morning light revealed the historic building largely undamaged, a testament to the precision of the Ghost Hunters' operation. Only subtle signs indicated the night's activities. "My God, Mike," Sarah breathed, taking in the sight of dozens of captured cartel operators, their sophisticated equipment scattered and disabled. "What happened here?" "They made a mistake," Marcus replied simply. "Thought they were dealing with a simple shopkeeper." Sarah studied the captured men with professional interest. Her law enforcement experience told her she was looking at highly trained operators, yet they sat docile, many still staring into space with shocked expressions. "These aren't ordinary cartel soldiers," she observed. "I'm seeing military-grade equipment, professional tactical gear. These men were special forces level operators." "Where is the operative word," Frost commented, materializing beside them. They learned an expensive lesson about underestimating their targets. Through the morning mist, more law enforcement. Vehicles began arriving. State police tactical teams, FBI response units, even DEA investigators. Marcus watched them begin their work with professional efficiency, knowing they would find exactly what the ghost hunters wanted them to find. "Sir," Tech reported through their secure channel, "law enforcement communications suggest they're piecing together their own narrative. They think this was a failed assault on a classified government facility." "Let them think that," Marcus replied, quietly. "Sometimes the best cover story is the one your opponents create for themselves." Sarah pulled Marcus aside as the federal agents began processing the scene. "Mike, I've been in law enforcement 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. These men, they're broken, not just defeated, broken." Marcus watched as Vega was led to a transport vehicle, the once confident cartel commander moving like a man who had seen something his world view couldn't accommodate. "Sometimes," Marcus told her, "the most effective defense isn't in weapons or tactics. It's in showing your enemy that everything they believe about warfare is wrong." The historic building had become more than just a battlefield. It was now a message to criminal organizations across the continent, a warning that some targets weren't worth the cost, that some quiet businesses might hide more than they appeared. "Sir," Hawk called out, "intercepting interesting chatter from cartel frequencies. Word is spreading fast. They're already creating their own myths about what happened here." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The ghost hunter's victory would be more effective because of its mystery. The criminal underworld would never know exactly what had happened, making the warning even more potent. "Ghost team beginning withdrawal," Frost reported. "All evidence of our advanced systems removed. Let them try to figure out how a simple deli owner defeated their elite operators." The morning sun climbed higher, illuminating a scene that would be studied and debated in classified briefings and criminal circles for years to come. The cartel's enforcement unit, one of the most feared criminal organizations in the hemisphere, had been systematically dismantled in a single night. "Remember," Marcus told his team through their secure channel, "the best victory isn't the one that demonstrates your strength. It's the one that makes others question their own." The deli would return to its quiet existence, serving sandwiches and soups, but its reputation would grow into something else, a warning, a legend, a reminder that some old soldiers never lose their edge. They just learn to hide it better until it's needed. The week following Operation Deli brought significant changes to the historic district. News of the cartel's devastating defeat spread through criminal networks like wildfire, though the exact details remain shrouded in mystery and speculation. "Fascinating intelligence coming in," Tech reported during their final team briefing. "Every major cartel is pulling back operations from a 50-mile radius. No one wants to risk encountering whatever defeated their elite unit." Marcus sat in his restored command center, monitoring the ripple effects of their operation. The sophisticated defense systems remained hidden beneath the deli's historic facade, ready but hopefully never needed again. "Hawk, what are the corridors telling us?" "Complete cessation of cartel movement through the district. They're abandoning previously held properties, withdrawing surveillance teams. The psychological impact exceeded our expectations."